Here, we don't need to get anybody on. I think we're good. Martha wouldn't know.
Yeah, I think Larry's tied up over in St. Genevieve. They called, got some federal money. Do a project to their house.
All right, everybody ready to get started?
St. Genevieve County.
Stand, set it up.
What, a couple hours stuff?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, do you mind, please?
Sure. Heavenly Father, we just come to you today to ask you to watch over this meeting, help these commissioners make the decisions that are right for the people of this county. And as always, watch over our emergency workers and all our employees as they go about their daily jobs. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey,
Thank you.
Yeah, I hadn't either. Morning, guys.
Morning.
How we doing?
Hey,
Morning.
good. How are you guys?
Good.
Okay, you guys know all three of these guys?
I don't think I know who you are.
Warren Moody.
Warren? Oh, Warren, okay. Danny,
nice to
nice to meet you. All right, everybody else I think I know, so. All right, well, today we're here to talk about the build team. Looks like we have a little bigger crowd than we thought we were gonna have, which is not a problem. But today's really about us getting back to where we, kind of a new starting point for us to talk to these guys. I think there'll be a whole lot of public comment, maybe, at the end if we can, but right now we're gonna focus with these guys and get a plan, so. Everybody's all right with that. So let's get started.
All right. Well, we appreciate you guys taking the time to meet with us and being able to meet in person. I think some of these conversations are a lot easier to have face-to-face versus Zoom meetings. Definitely appreciate that. And just want to say that, our firm, and I think I speak for River City too, are committed to standing by the county and trying to find a solution to get these projects going forward. I know you guys have a commitment to the community, and we want to do what we can to help that out and get this thing back on the right track. So I know we received bids on the projects here a while back, and obviously a lot higher construction costs than what we originally anticipated. I think that was a lot of the current market. That being said, we want to come back and just basically relook at a lot of different ideas, what we can do to get this thing back in within budget, so you guys can fulfill your promise to the community to provide two projects, both the Government Center and the Justice Center. So really, I just want to start back maybe almost at square one, not quite square one, but just kind of relook at some of the ideas. I know there's been some recent developments with the county, I think in the process. I previously purchased the car wash lot over there across the street, or actually next door here, as well as it's like there's potential purchase of another brick building close to here, which I wasn't quite familiar with. I know David or Gary sent an email on that, indicating you guys were looking at that piece, might be able to house some of the county offices in that facilities, which we want to take a look at some point too. So really just kind of relook at a lot of things here. I know as far as the Justice Center, I kind of go back to the start of where we started off the design process, and I brought some drawings here we can distribute and kind of look at if you like. I know at one point, obviously, we were looking at the smaller facility, 64 beds, which obviously I know the sheriff has no interest in. He'd like to get that full 96 beds, and I certainly understand that. At one point, we were looking at the courts piece of this building, can pass these around, as a quote phase 2 option. And
What is this?
so this is the floor plan for the Justice Center.
The existing one, right, or the?
As it's currently designed, yeah. I've got a few more copies here if need be, but, so yeah, this is the current floor plan. Maybe some additional copy. So like I said, kind of going back and revisiting kind of where we started and where we ended up, just kind of looking at some of these things. So what I've highlighted on this floor plan here, so this was the one that was currently bid just here in the last several months. And looking at that option, you know, obviously we were at 20 million for just this Justice Center, and I think we were done with 4 million, 1.5 million for the government center, give or take. So to look at how we can get this thing back in budget, I think we're gonna have to look at some large scale scope reductions or changes to the plans here. May not be the most popular thing. You may say this is not even something we're willing to entertain, and I certainly understand that, but I just wanted to throw these back out for conversation. So kind of looking back at this blue highlighted area here would include the 2 courts as well as the judges' chambers, court clerks, and the prosecutor's offices. And that piece there represents about 12,500 square feet of floor plan. So a pretty significant chunk. I think we're 43,000 overall here. You know, is that something that could be considered for a quote phase 2 option, or at least a shelled space to where we can build the interior walls and so forth in the HVAC in a future day? Again, I'm just looking at large picture items to help us get some significant scope down to help get costs down as well too. The other piece you're seeing highlighted here in orange is the 2 pods that we had bid as an alternate bid. And I certainly know where the sheriff's department stands with that. Again, but that was another, if we were to look at do the dorm housing, which was previously bid as an alternate, that's $400,000 savings there, which is pretty significant. I certainly understand the desire not to do so, but again, when I'm looking at big ticket items, you know, between these 2 areas here, you know, if this blue area here was to be done as a quote phase 2, I mean, you're probably looking somewhere in the ballpark of $3 million savings there. It's pretty significant cost impact. And then you combine that with the $400,000 with the dorm option for the 2 pods there, we're starting to take some big chunks out of this thing. Again, it may not be something we're willing to entertain.
What's the difference in what phases in? We're still gonna have to pay that
Right.
price, so.
Right.
I mean, how does that save us anything?
It doesn't really save you anything other
Right.
than what you're paying for initially with the sheriff's department and the jail, and then whatever we rescope on the government center.
Yeah. But overall, on the $20 million bond, it doesn't save us anything. It actually will still put us over or up to.
Well, they're saying to do the phase at a later date and asking if it's something we'd entertain, but I think we're committed to fulfill the language that was on the bond, which obviously included the Justice Center, and keep it in the budget now.
Right.
So I guess that's where you're probably driving at, is that what we're gonna have to do
Yeah, I mean,
to fulfill the language on the bond.
Yeah, so, yeah. I'm sorry.
No, please, and I'd like this to be a conversation, not just a presentation. So any feedback is certainly appreciated. You know, so is that something then to make this a true justice center, we can look at even shelling one of the courts versus having 2 courts in there? You know, or any other pieces. It's like I said, you know, in order to get costs down, we've got to look at some type of scope reduction. Obviously, we still want to fulfill the commitment to the community. So, you know, what can we look at potentially reducing on the project? And I'm open to any and all suggestions. You know, we've looked at everything from materials to square footage. Obviously, with the jail piece of this, there's certain standards with the American Correctional Association for square footage and so forth, so you really can't squeeze this thing anymore. I mean, the bed count is going to dictate what that size of the
You're talking about the jail cells itself.
the cells, the day rooms, holding cells, and so
I mean, I
forth.
see a lot, like, there's a padded cell, and then there's a padded room, there's storage. I mean, is that, Kevin, do you wanna, you wanna weigh in on this? I mean,
Well, I mean, if this is today's plan that we're looking at, I mean, I don't know where you want me to weigh in. I didn't have a responsibility for designing.
I'm just talking, you know, in general, just discussion of, you know, beyond what, you know, we're regulated to have, if there's stuff that you think you can do without, you know, or you think you absolutely have to meet, or you have to have,
I know the jail facility itself, of course, just as Kevin had stated, that's pretty well standard stuff. When it comes to the office space, you know, I think the office space is sufficient in this plan. I don't know that there's a lot of extras, you know, I think it's, I don't know what the total square footage of the office space is in this plan, but, you know, and just looking at it, I don't know what you'd take away or what you'd add, or, you know, I wouldn't have any suggestion on that. I think it's pretty well, you know, it's sufficient space. That's all I'd really be able to say, I guess.
So from this, pretty much this left side right here, we can't really change a whole lot in it, right?
Yeah, I said, I know, and obviously Sheriff Friend was not part of the original discussions with how it's developed. I know we did sit down and walk through it with him just to make sure stuff was adequate since he took office. And like I said, there's really not much fabric off of this thing. I mean, it's pretty, pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and a pretty dense construction, especially on the detention side. I mean, there's not extra space in here. We have no grand lobbies. We have no high-end materials. I mean, a lot of this is sealed concrete floors, block painted walls. You know, it doesn't get much simpler than that. Unfortunately, I said some of the construction costs have just continually escalated, you know, over the past several years. And so that's kind of today's market, and that's what we're dealing with, trying to figure out how we can compensate current construction costs with the building we're trying to build here.
Can we back up just a little bit?
Yeah.
Obviously, we're committed, we're trying to be committed to the language that's on the ballot and,
Sure.
and the budget. I think we are committed to it. They're actually where we're at. So what you're telling us is I'd had a discussion with Larry on about the climate of the bidding. When this
Right.
thing got bid, it was right before any pandemics and construction was,
Right.
I mean, I think those are the things you guys were hedging and telling us, because I know we hedged into this for any added construction costs.
Right.
I know all those things were put into those budgets, and we've seen in the very beginning on the conceptual end of this thing. So I think there was a good amount of planning in what happened in it, but when we bid this was probably as bad a time to bid this as could have happened in the past.
Right.
Now, we took a couple scopes and said, hey, wait a minute, and that was part of the reason this was approached the way it was, we said, we don't like the numbers, let's go back out, let's renegotiate. We took an electrical scope for, I don't know, we reduced it by 40%, I guess, by just making a few adjustments and
Right.
getting better bidders in there. And so when I talked to Larry, when the numbers came back in, you know, that was one of the things that we were hoping. The government work is now much more sought after work. Is that what I'm seeing and hearing? And it's being a lot more competitively bid. Part of the reason we're seeing that maybe the reduction in the cost in the electrical scope is, I mean, I think we'd be foolish just to go out and say, we're gonna bid it again, and expect we're gonna knock 30% out of this. And that's what you're telling us, we've got to have some options and some alternate pricing. Either minimize some square footage, minimize 2 courtrooms, something, but we're gonna have to figure out a way to get this
Right.
into besides just assuming that the markets come down.
Right, right. No, you're absolutely right. And in some locations, we have seen better bid prices come in. I was just out in Dickinson County on Monday, talking to Brad Holman, the county administrator. McCown Gordon was over there. They recently did a school project and saw some incredibly great numbers come in compared to what we bid a year ago on their jail insurance
Was
department.
that for labor? I mean, are we gonna have trouble with material here?
Your crystal ball is as good as mine. I wish I had an answer for that, because right now, you know, we're able to get equipment and materials and so forth, not an issue. With this whole pandemic mess, shipping parts and stuff, whether it's electronics or whatever, I don't know what you're gonna see on some of these markets. You know, simple electronics for a packaged rooftop unit. You know, my difficulty getting those in, they've slowed some production down in some of the facilities. Now they're trying to catch back up since things are starting to pace back up. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, Danny.
But to answer Mike's point too, I think that when you look at the forecast for the next 6 months and the next 12 months, I think from a contractor, from an architect standpoint, there's not a lot of projects in the hopper. So I think that there is a little bit of truth to that, saying, you know, there's not going to be the work that we expected like there was a year ago. And I can see there can be competitive pricing.
Right. The second thing that I think that we were hoping to capitalize on is I've got several comments from smaller contractors, which, you know, suppliers and this and that. They didn't know this was bidding, and maybe some local drawing rooms or maybe really put some better pressure on. I know what the first bid on the electrical, we had 1 or 2 responses maybe, and they were high, and then as we went out and really pursued some, we went after, 9 bids and got 5 or 6 back, and so, and I think that bid pressure, and people know that from bidding, not $20 million, but some good sized project for years, but your suppliers, they, oh yeah, I've got 4 or 5 requests on a bid, you know.
Right.
And it's just the way you're looking at things.
And
You're
at
the
the-
only one that's called me on this job, why,
Right.
you know,
You can pretty much pencil in your own number at that point.
well,
And at the time when we first originally bid the electrical package and the numbers, you didn't have a lot of people that were looking for, I mean, there was a lot that was out to bid at the time too. So you got to be able to pick and choose what jobs you want to pursue or what jobs you want to bid. I think now as that market gets slower and slower and there's more opportunities, I think there are gonna be a lot more interest too.
but I think we all agree it'd be naive to think that that's just a fix. We're gonna rebid this, get more
Right.
competitive, and we have to have some other options to go after, and I don't know, we're looking for an incredible hurry up redesign, but this is the reason we're having this conversation.
Right.
So we can figure out where we can put out some alternate costs for some square footage savings, and, because it's gonna go beyond that, and obviously the purpose of tying up that other facility where we can reduce some square footage. And
One of the things that I think that there's a possibility, Tom, is the government center as well. You know, when we originally planned this project out, you know, we had always said that if you could do those 2 projects concurrently, you would save on all of your general conditions, you would save on remobilizations. That option obviously doesn't work with the move and all that situation too, but I think in the government center, there is potential to save money on that side too, if you can do that concurrently. If you know, one of the options we'd always said was if you look at a local GC, maybe handling that portion of the project, I think you can see costs come down on that market as well. I think that if there's opportunities to, like moving people in other spots or de-scoping the government center, I think that we have a way of cutting that down. I think there are ways of getting there on the government center as well.
Oh, I think, absolutely, and I think if you're gonna see it on a smaller project, I mean, it's very nice to say, we're opening this up to the community and everybody can bid, they can't. How many contractors could bid on a $3 or $4 million electrical package and bond it?
Right.
You know,
We saw that with one of the local plumbing contractors, you know, we spoke with, who didn't have the opportunity to bid it firsthand, just because of his workload and so forth. We tried to get him the second time. I think we had him up until, a couple of days before bid, and he was having trouble bonding the project.
It was too much project to take on, so these smaller contractors.
And we've all been there where you've got somebody on the hook and they're not able to man and they're dragging the project, and that's not a good thing either. So we got that, but I like your concept of GC in that, getting in some smaller, you're gonna get more competitive numbers if people can handle that, so we can break some of that out. But I don't disagree, concurrent is obviously the way to go. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, obviously the way we had our bid packages wrote, we had to have somebody bid on both buildings. So if they couldn't handle the Justice Center, they obviously couldn't handle the government center. I think it's fair for everybody's stake to get that separated or let them have that chance to bid just the government center.
So that's like our third opportunity to reduce some costs by, obviously we all feel like there's a better competitive market. I've also spoken with someone in town that I've done a little work with in the past, and they felt the same way, and had worked for J.E. Dunn a couple of years ago, and they're all telling me the same thing. School work, government work, it's more sought after now than what it was, because a lot of the private projects are nervous and pulled money and waited to see what the market's going. It's guaranteed money, there's no.
So say we did go, say that was an option, we went that way, would Goldberg, would you guys oversee all that, since you guys have already designed all the plans and all that, or would we, I mean?
No, absolutely we would. That's what we're committed to do. Whatever we have to do to these pieces of paper to get this thing within a budget that these guys can build and can construct, so. I mean, so if we have to look at carving off some of these things, if we have to look at rescoping the government center, there's some other things with the storage buildings and so forth I want to take a look at. Yeah, and the government center's in my set of plans here as well too. At the very least, even bidding these as an alternate bid item. So say we have that way we have that buffer. If prices don't come in as good as we would hope, we still have a buffer and say, okay, if we don't do this piece or this piece or this piece, we can still have this thing within the budget. So I think we just need to identify what are some of the options that we can look at to help give us that buffer we need on bid day. And I do think we'll see some better bid prices come in, because, yeah, there is a ton of hospital work, K-12 work, private developer work that's just been shelved. I know one of the engineering firms we work with, they lost 12 projects and are in jeopardy of closing their door, all hospital projects. I mean, so you're seeing just a lot of stuff put on the shelves right now, and contractors are getting a little hungry for this stuff.
And quite frankly, you're geared to do this type of bigger work, and you've got that kind of staff, you wanna keep them. I mean, we've seen it before in a Ripple, that people almost worked on a negative cash flow to keep cash flow working. And, I'm not saying that that's where we're at, but it's obviously a much more competitive market at this type of work than what we were when we bid this. So we'll hang our hat on that a little bit here, and more advertising, and maybe we can get, maybe a little more involvement, which I think that's gonna be, that's one of the things. The third thing is, some alternates on some scope reductions. I mean, in our language, in our ballot, it clearly says we're gonna have a 96, it says, law enforcement, judicial center, and government administration center. And so I feel like I'm committed to make sure that happens. Do we give them 2 huge courtrooms, or do we give them one medium-sized courtroom that, I mean, obviously when you're asking somebody what they want and they're not writing the checks for it, it's usually a little bit of pie in the sky. When it comes down to realism of what's going to happen,
Right.
well, we really got to have this, and so I think that's kind of where we're at.
Sure.
There's some places, just like you said, in this jail, there's minimum square footage. We don't want another facility where we're out of code compliance, and if there is a death in it, that we're going to be,
Right.
in a position of being liable for. I understand that's pretty much bare bones. And like Larry told me, he said this is about as efficient as we can get in the law enforcement part of this.
Yeah.
And Kevin, what I think Danny's asking you is, in the jail portion of it, the law enforcement, if you see any square footage, or we're looking at square footage, whether it's mechanical space or storage or actually finished office space, anything that you can see that's gonna help it. And I don't think we're looking to start over with a crayon, right? But if you see some things that's maybe not, I don't know. We looked at the government center, and possibly we could move a couple of departments to another facility and reduce some square footage there. Be mapping, maybe appraisers, we got them up on the second floor, they're inaccessible from ADA, or that was one of our concerns when that grew to that. But the next part of that is we've got a hardened space for our emergency management department over there. Does it make better sense to do that below grade? And of course, we've already talked about the basement issue in the rock, but I know we got a pretty good fill on that northwest corner over there.
Mm-hmm.
I would like, and I'm not asking for an answer right now, because I know I hate it when somebody says, what's it gonna cost, how's this gonna work? Well, I got to evaluate to give you a good, sound answer, but
Sure.
Is it possible maybe that would make better sense to harden that space below that corner?
Right.
And I think that one of the original issues, and I wasn't in all those meetings, but was the access. To get access without having to go through the jail or the law enforcement. And I think that in that corner, I think they're looking at the elevations, there's several feet. We've got ramps designed in.
Mm-hmm.
It may be an opportunity. And you may say, no, there isn't, but I know that there's a good fill in that corner. So
Right.
I don't know that rock's gonna be a huge problem there. That's a deal, yeah.
Right.
You can come back to me and say, no, we got borings and this is what we got, and this is why that's not a good idea. I don't know, but maybe that would make better sense to put that hardened area and get it up off that elevated hardened area.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what you had for ceiling or walls there, but I assume it's masonry construction.
Yeah, we had CMU walls, and then we had concrete lid on that thing. So really, you're kind of 6 one way, half a dozen the other, as far as the materials. As far as, you can have concrete floor, you got concrete block walls, you got concrete lid. Whether it's on the first floor or on the basement level, it's kind of 6 one way, half a dozen the other.
A little less rough, you know.
Right, and certainly something we can take a look at. I'm not opposed to looking at anything on this.
And I don't know, are we thinking that we may need to trim out all right, we're trimming out one of the courtroom, I don't know.
We got an email in to the judge to get her input on that, but, I think that's gonna be your call, yes.
Well, there's obviously gonna be some compromises, we're not gonna just say, oh, we're gonna rebid it, and it's gonna come out with, that's beyond naive.
So are you looking for us to give you ideas to reduce and then rebid, or what do you,
So I
what's
got
your
a set of
thoughts?
plans here just to talk through that said anything and everything.
Okay.
Said, you know, when you got a project come in like this and we have to do some rethinking here, I'd like to put as many things back on the table as possible. You know, is there anything we overlooked? And politically, there may be some things we don't want to mess with, and logistically, there may be some things we don't even want to consider. But, you know, I look at the buildings, and I know here recently, we can get to the Government Center here in a second, obviously there was some water damage there at the court building. You know, is that something we need to take a look at, what that's gonna take to redo pieces of that now as well too? I'm not sure what state that's in, or restoration-wise, or mitigation-wise, where that's at. No, go ahead.
Now finish your thought.
You know, so when I look at that, it's like, you know, I'd really like to look at the existing sheriff's office and jail again. You got a block building with metal steel structure for a roof. I know it's got water issues and mold issues and so forth. Maybe it's not worth looking at, but is it something we can reconsider and say, is there better value? Because there's 6,000 square feet of space there. Is that something we could look at spending some money at, or less money at, than new construction, even if it is pretty significant rework on some of that? I said maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
Okay.
But just some things like that. I know as far as storage buildings, so we can pass some of these around.
Now, whatever happened to that? That was a conversation that was talked about for a while, and then it just kind of disappeared.
Sure.
Because when we got, you know, when we weren't able to do the basement, we were told we were getting a controlled, you know, we would have the basic controlled storage facility, and then it just never showed up on any plans. And
It all came down to funding, and the essential goal was any money left over in contingency was going to be used towards that project.
Well, here's our essential goal, and we put it in front of the voters, and they come back from 76% and said, yeah, we're okay with this, and you're right, there's no storage facility, but we're talking about, it might be something as simple as a pre-engineered metal building we use with the money that we have set aside for contingencies, and, you know, I mean, I get that. I'm okay with that part, but, because it's not on that ballot, it's just something.
Right. You know, and so this is the site plan right now. The large blue box here you're seeing is the Justice Center. Obviously, those residences there on the left-hand side of the page are no longer there. The light blue colored boxes are the car wash and the 2 storage buildings there. You know, again, something to take a look at when you talk storage building. Those are 2 storage buildings already there. Can we utilize that for storage for the Justice Center, for the Sheriff's Department? You know, and even that car wash I'd like to take a look at. I know the original intent was to knock that thing down. Can we take a look at that? Can that be a maintenance and vehicle forensics bay or something like that with simple modifications? Again, trying to reutilize the buildings there if it's in decent shape and worth putting some money towards. Just something we'd like to take a look at.
Sure.
You know, and that's something I think from a view standpoint, we could easily fence off this area here so it doesn't detract from the view of the Government Center from the street out here. And still to utilize buildings that are already there if they're in decent shape. So, again, something simple to take a look at.
Yeah, I think we're open to whatever
Yeah.
ideas you guys can come up
And
with.
same thing with, I believe, what used to be the fire department there, that building right next to the sheriff's department, little 2-bay, pre-engineered metal building.
Mhm.
Something we can take a look at again too. Can it be used there? Can we reshift some parking lots? Can we actually, I think Chris had brought this up the other day just in conversation, can we take that thing down and relocate it for cheaper cost and utilize that somehow? Just something we want to take a
Sure.
look at.
Okay.
So,
you guys still have the design on, somebody showed me a design on adding on to the back side of the courthouse. Was that I've never seen a plan for that. What?
there was a plan at one point that had the current court building, then had basically the Government Center piece of it linked and then somehow tied to the backside of the courthouse there. Several reasons that didn't work out too well. Logistics wise, it was kind of a hodgepodge of buildings and so forth with these links or walkways and whatnot. Then you have the elevation difference as well too, between where the first floor of the courthouse is and then where the ground floor of these other buildings are. That, and you've got a beautiful courthouse, you don't want to go add stuff onto the outside of and just take away from the historic value of that, because it's a beautiful looking courthouse. So, that's where that one kind of took a different path. So,
There were several conceptual drawings that was issued, I think, you know, at one time, and again, I'm part of this project, another facility need that the community is needing is a health department.
Right.
And Larry graciously kind of designed something over in the corner with input from a couple times, I think, from our health folks with it.
Yeah, and I think even at one point, the current sheriff's office and jail facility was looked at for the health department, renovating that at some point for the health department. I was digging back through all the drawings we've done, because we've done quite a few iterations of these drawings over the past year and a half now. So, again, just trying to go back and refocus, say, okay, what are we overlooking? What can we do differently here? You know, what can we do to help reduce the scope and the cost of this overall project? Another thing to pass this one around. So I've got plenty of drawings today just for taking a look at some of these things.
Everybody here might share when they need to.
In the jail, would it be, I mean, you think we'd save anything by building like a half basement? It's kind of like on the courthouse now that's, 5 feet above ground and 5 feet below ground.
Yeah, it's something we can take a look at. I couldn't say right off the top of my head. Honestly, it throws some other things into consideration.
And that's when I first got in on the project, when the basement was taken away, and that's why I focused so hard on it. And
Sure. Again, that's something that I'm not opposed to putting anything on the list at this point. I think we gotta look at everything.
In the basement, you're adding square footage, right? You add square footage, you're gonna add cost.
Right.
So,
I know part of the issue with the Justice Center site was the rock that's underneath there. We had rock and shallow like 1.5 feet and somewhere down 7, 8 feet. We had weathered shale on one side and we had hard limestone on the other side. So the issue we have there is a differential sediment on the building. So you can't, even though we bear on rock here, this rock over here is not as stable as, the weathered shale is not as stable as the limestone over there. So we had two options we looked at. It was either drilling down and socketing piers into those foundations where we had the same level of limestone foundation for bearing, or we looked at bringing dirt in and staying and keeping a buffer between that rock and the foundations there. And so when we did a cost evaluation of that, it seemed to be more cost effective to bring in some dirt, build that side up, as well as tying into the elevations of the street street levels as well too. Because part of that current site sits almost 14 feet below, where it kind of heads to the west there towards that ditch. And so I think we've got 12 or 14 feet of fill over on that side just to get that toward and tie the driveways and stuff back into street elevations. So something we looked at when you go sticking a basement back on there. Now we've cut down through that. Say we did a 9-foot or 10-foot basement, it'd probably be more like 10 or 12 feet. Now we're starting to get back down to that rock issue again, even on that west side of the site there. So we're gonna be dealing with that again. Are we looking at putting piers in to support a basement, or are we able to build that site up some more? We had more grading costs. It's just one of those things we have to weigh out and take a look at. But that was the biggest determining factor with the basement levels on those, was just the site and the rock that's underneath there. So again, but I'm not opposed to relooking at anything.
It's exactly. What I was going to comment earlier on the government centers, I know a lot of that finish over there was that old gold black design. If you've ever worked with that, what a nightmare. But
Yeah.
But anyway, were we leaving any of that initially, or?
Yeah, we were.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's, I know Jackie had sent some pictures, looked like I had some water damage on that. Sounded like there was a couple inches of water staying in the building, which kind of peeled that lamination up off those. And again, it's something we need to take a look at, how much we were doing here. This plan here in front of you was actually looking at, so the floor plan here, the dashed line areas here were areas that were being demoed out. We're reconfiguring this to try to make better use of the space within the same building envelope. Can we look at backtracking on this? You know, can we look at leaving this the way it is, walls, floors, ceilings, so forth, and just reshuffling some of the spaces around inside there, trying to help reduce the cost on this government center? Like, you're still gonna have to do some modifications, but if it's something where we've got damaged sheetrock in there now, or flooring issues, or whatever the case is, it may be a moot point as well too. We just gotta go in and tear it out and redo it, just because of the shape it's in.
Was that, I remember somebody saying something about the structural integrity of that building from the get-go. I mean, is it even worth doing something like this? I mean, my goal is to not have to deal with this in 10 years, and, if that building's not, sufficient for what we need, I mean, why utilize it?
Right, well, it's a pre-engineered metal building. It's got metal wall paneling outside underneath that brick veneer. I mean, obviously, it's been standard for 20-some years. I think it's been built, maybe longer than that. it's a sound building, but it's not as sound as a block building with metal bars joist on it. I mean, it's a pre-engineered metal building. That being said, there's been a lot of metal buildings like that that have been around a long time. So again, I think building's in good shape. It needs a little, maintenance to it, obviously with the roof piece of that and the guttering system. And then whatever damage has been done in here that still needs to be dealt with. But you've got a lot of metal stud walls. Yeah, it's got sheetrock that's been pre-finished versus sheetrock that's, taped and painted in the field, but it's still metal stud and sheetrock walls just like you would any other facility. So, concrete floor slabs, concrete floor slab, so. But again, is that something that we can take a look at if we stay the course on this piece of it to leave a lot of this in? It's kind of piecemeal demolition and reworking some stuff, which has a high dollar value to it for the scope of work there. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And I think that's what, part of the higher cost on the government center piece of this is just the small, localized scopes of work with select demolition and reworking some systems, so something I think we ought to take a look at.
But even if we save $1 million or $2 million over on this project, it's not gonna be enough to even touch this project, right? I mean, because we're already.
Correct. And that's why I say, I think we gotta put a lot of things on the table just for consideration, or at least discussion, to walk through these things, say, okay, if we did this, and this, that gives us enough buffer, and then we get favorable bids in, great, then we can afford to put some of these pieces back into the project. I think is what we gotta do.
Which is really the general concept to start with, is you design as much as you can get into the dollar budget of it, and then at the end of it, if it comes in a little high, you reduce it, because it's a negotiated work, you can reduce that and get that into a comfort level. It just came in higher than what we thought. So if we're looking at maybe more competitive bids, and hopefully we'll accomplish that with maybe some a little more advertising, local advertising, we break out and get a smaller piece more accessible to maybe some smaller, more competitive contractor. I know a couple of them are interested, or fairly locally interested in doing that portion of it. I would assume it'll probably come in a little cheaper than some of the other folks we're using. And it sounds to me like we're just a little bit in front of the horse. You guys are wanting to look at several facilities and other options and come back with recommendations.
Yep.
And I think you're just gonna fill us out how open we are to that. Well, I think we're open. I think we've been advised and are well advised to say that this is voted by the public. We own a project. We own a project with, meets this language, and we own one that meets that budget.
Right.
And I think from then on to say, oh, we're not, I think we need to evaluate everything you can bring us and see if we can't work on this.
Yeah.
But we're glad you're fully enthusiastic to help us get this working to be, so.
Well, like I said, yeah, I mean, we just gotta look at everything and anything, and I said, even going back and relooking at the existing, sheriff's office and jail over there, is that a building that can be utilized? If we were to do, this is around too. The green box you're seeing there is the current courts building. The blue box is that storage building here between the sheriff's department and the courts building, and the orange box is that sheriff's department and jail. Is that something we can look at? Is there any logistics, any cost saving to look at? Okay, say we renovated the court piece of that, and we didn't do the addition to it. We've got a storage building here. We got 6,000 square feet of sheriff's office over here. If we deemed it being beneficial to look at that again, say it took some demolition, some metal stud walls, and new HVAC and all this stuff, is it cheaper than doing an addition to the current courts building? Just something to take a look at. So I know the building's not in the greatest shape, but when I look at a building that's made out of block walls and steel bar joists, to me, that's a building that's going to stand the test of time and be there for a while. Cosmetically, or weather tightness, or whatever we need to take a look at to remedy what current state it's in, that's something I think we just need to take a look at again and say, okay, it's gonna cost this amount to redo this, and there's 6,000 square feet of space. I know it's not under the same roof, maybe that's not desirable, but it's something we can take a look at again.
Sure.
I mean, I said, I just wanna take a look at anything and everything. Or that storage building there, is that something that can be relocated or can it be used in its current location? Just something to take a look at from what Chris was telling me, it sounded like the structure's in really good shape, and it's worth taking a look at, so.
I guess it all goes back to this is the main problem.
Right.
So, I mean, this is all great,
Right.
and it's worth looking at if you had the money for it.
Right.
But what are we gonna do with this?
Right.
Because this is the killer right
It's all
here.
got to come together, but
Yeah.
I think where we're at right now is we gotta meet the language of the ballot, we've gotta meet the budget, and I don't think there's anything in my book that's holy that says, okay, I'm not willing to give up or demo the jail or anything else. Any ideas you guys come up with?
Yeah, I don't disagree. But today, are you trying to find out what you can eliminate from here?
Yeah, I mean, really, this is the,
This is a warm-up, right? What can you get rid of?
this is 3/4 of the project right here, obviously. And yeah, so we can look at all these other buildings, and basically that pertains to the government center.
Right.
This thing. The Justice Center being the biggest piece of this. You know, what can we do, you know, and we even started looking at things. I know Warren and I just had some preliminary conversations, even finish-wise. I know we had a lot of brick veneer on this thing, with some ephes above that. You know, on the housing piece of this, can we go back and look at doing just plain simple metal wall panel on this stuff? I don't know if you guys seen Bourbon County's facility.
Yeah, we've been through it.
Yeah, metal wall panels, pre-engineered metal building. It's not a bad-looking building, but is that something we can consider? I mean, it's probably pennies in the overall picture. I don't know what the value of that would be, but even look at simple things like that. Take a look at.
I think we have to. I think we're obligated to. Now,
Sure.
are you gonna approach them like as an alternate? Or are you
We
gonna-
certainly can. I mean, we can bid it out both ways. It's no
And nobody likes to bid anything that's got 20 alternates on it, but it seems to be the new norm. You know,
Right.
so, yeah, I think you have to. Now, we looked at Bourbon County, and one of the things that actually, it was a pre-engineered building with metal wall panels, and one of the things that kind of jazzed me to start with was, we should be able to keep some costs down with that. So,
Right.
Yeah.
No, and I said it's something we kind of took a look at initially with this, with the amount of masonry that goes into, especially the housing piece of this. We tried to see, I think the more efficient way to do this, if you already got masonry in here, detention masonry walls are grouted full, but rebar every 16 inches on center, and the entire wall is slung full. So you've got a load-bearing wall right off the bat, just because of the detention nature of that. Use that, set some bar joist on versus build a whole shell around this thing.
Redundant cost.
Right. And so that's why we tried to utilize the masonry that's already here for load-bearing masonry and go with the most efficient route. Pre-engineered buildings work in some scenarios. Bourbon County's particular housing pod was kind of more broke off from the sheriff's admin pod, so it was a clean break between the two areas there. Whereas this, we've got kind of a combination of things, especially with the courts piece of this and the sheriff's admin piece. It's more of one giant box. There's no good clean break in here. I think that in this case, if we looked at a pre-engineered metal building for the housing piece of this, we'd probably cause more complications and increased cost. Even though that piece of the shell would be cheaper, but then all the things you gotta do around it to separate it, because you have a metal building and you've got conventional framed or masonry framed or whatever the case was, you start adding that cost right back into it. But,
The last thing I want to do though is just whittle everything down, try to get it into something to get the project going, and then we get some half-assed project that we're dealing with in 10 years, something that doesn't look good on the main street here.
Right.
And all because we just wanted to get going on this project.
Right.
And I'd rather much not do anything rather than do that.
Right.
And have to deal with this thing 10 years from now. If we're spending millions and millions, we better be happy and get what we want at the end of the day and not have a question about it.
Sure.
I mean, that's kind of,
no, I understand that completely. And so like I said, yeah, again, when we look at these things, you'd be hard pressed to find any other firm that can design a building as dense and efficient as this. Been working for Larry for a number of years now. I've seen a lot of other firms work. I used to work on the engineering side and worked for some of those firms. And you're not gonna find anything more efficient than this floor plan right here when it comes to the detention and the housing piece of it. And honestly, the sheriff's admin piece of this, and even the courts and clerks areas, these are simple, 10 by 12 offices. There's nothing elaborate, there's nothing fancy. We don't have any, mahogany doors. It's all just pretty simple, plain stuff. So again, like I said, I'm open to suggestions. I just want to throw some of these things out for consideration, on what we can do. Or take big chunks out of the budget. We're gonna take some chunks out of these projects too, and hope for a good bid market as well. So,
To truly reduce costs, you gotta reduce square footage.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
gonna be some compromise, no doubt.
I mean, does the ballot language have square footage of building, or is it somewhat generic?
No, you guys, we'll get Dave a copy of them all for you, and then you can see where we're at. And
Sure.
the budgetary numbers that we're restrained by.
Sure.
So you know. I have a little Larry to write into this. So
Yeah.
they-
Yeah, yeah.
They are. So, yeah,
You know, I know some additional stuff we took a look at, and I don't think we priced anything out, but just some revisions to the parking lots and so forth, just to simplify that and reduce the amount of parking. That was another thing we're looking at, because we're looking to set at everything. Again, it helps us a little bit, but it doesn't help us in the big chunks. You know, a lot of these smaller chunks start to add up, but yeah, what can we look at bigger picture wise to help us out? Because this is the main animal right here we're dealing with. So,
It sounds to me like it would be appropriate for you to meet with the judge, the head judge of the district, and talk about that space.
Yeah,
Is that-
absolutely.
Is that,
sure. It sounds like the agenda is you guys need to walk through these facilities again and see if you can't round table up some ideas to bring back to us. And I'll tell you, my position is I'm willing to entertain what we need to do as long as it fits the ballot and the budget.
Sure.
And, is she available today, Gary, or?
no, we'll have to do that at some point.
We can set up a meeting anytime, yeah, absolutely.
Can the courtroom remain at the government center right now? Still have a court?
That's all, but that wasn't the
You mean
purpose.
interimly, or?
Maybe more, more substantial renovation over there, you know what I mean? To give them this, but keep it over there, take this square footage out of the Justice Center. You still have a Justice Center.
But then they have to transport.
Well, I can tell you,
And
yeah,
that's-
one of the things now, that is not my,
Oh, from court straight to jail.
Kevin popped up.
that's not one of my favorite ideas, but it may be provided before we're done, but I think Kevin will want to weigh in on this. But one of the reasons and justifications that was talked about during this process was, transporting prisoners, you know, Miami County, of course, they ended up with a tunnel and this and that, but at that same time, Wyandotte had those two deaths in the transportation of funeral, or of a inmate, and, it was,
It's less than ideal. Obviously, anytime you can put the courts next to the jail, it's beneficial from a safety standpoint and from a staffing standpoint.
is it something we may have to entertain? Well,
Right.
maybe, but that's where I think I'm at, is whatever ideas you guys can round table and come up with, and
Right.
we're not gonna say, oh, we love them all.
Yeah.
But there is gonna be some compromises. We're not just gonna rebid this in a better environment and advertise a little more and say, voila, there it is. We understand that. There's gonna be some compromises.
Sure. Well, we appreciate that, because I said, it's not an easy decision. You guys have very tough decisions, and we're here to help you however we can to get there. That's what we're here for.
Well, frankly, we're not in a position, we didn't vote for this. The public voted for this.
Right.
And we're not in a position to say, well, we're just not gonna do it.
Right.
We're not going back to the public.
We can look at that.
Keep this way
Does
it
it
is.
do anything?
They got a lot of costs.
Well, we do one building altogether,
Roughly.
two floors,
And I wrote it to
jail on bottom, government center on top.
Those are the numbers you guys, having done 300 of these type projects.
Right.
And you guys, I don't know how many you've done, but you'll be able to round table up something, I'm sure.
Right. You know, and that's something probably worth taking a look at, Danny. I know the initial thought was with the court building to reutilize a building that's there. It's gonna be less cost to utilize something that's already got a roof and four walls and a slab there, and renovate some pieces of that versus building it all over again on top.
You know, and that goes back to me. I live my life on goals, and I want to be a commissioner as long as I can. And if I am, I don't want to have to be dealing with this thing in 10 years or 15 years, and I don't want to be trapped by all these roads and not be able to go up. You know,
Right.
life, I mean, daily cost goes up, crime goes up. I mean, everything goes up. Our population's going to go up hopefully, and you know, I just don't want to be limited to this little building.
Right.
And then, you know, we spend $20 million on it, and in 10 years, we gotta, you know, we're tearing it down because we just can't make it work. Because we squeezed everything in here, and
Right.
we wanna hurry up and get this done and whatnot. I wanna be able to design it, me personally, I wanna be able to, you know, have bigger, but, you know, now we're in the you know, there's gonna be more cost to do bigger footings and all that, and we're just trying to get it within cost, which, I mean, is kind of, it's,
Yeah, and I know part of our initial, when the county first hired us, we started off with a feasibility study. Joe Weber, our criminologist, along with Larry, evaluated the arrest records or the projections for inmate capacity for the next 20 years. And that's how we come up with the size of detention facility, was projecting this out at least 20 years. So based on all past history, arrest records and so forth, and that's where that was projected out to be, just on the growth rate of crime and so forth. So for at least 20 years, and again, it's as good as the math and the projections there, but this facility should be able to handle Linn County's inmate population for a good 20 years. And then, you know, in addition to that, I think as of right now, the Sheriff's Department of County would have the ability to house either other counties' inmates or state inmates or whatever in this until that population increases over the next 20 years. So there's a potential revenue stream there as well too.
This all began as a jail study, just to see if it was something, and I think that number come back in 20 years is more like 60, was it 56 or 65?
Correct.
Somewhere in that area.
Yep.
And I think the steering committee and the groups that were meeting, their comfort level was, okay, let's, you know, because the cost of Bourbon County was facing that they went and built their jail, and all of a sudden they're not farming out right away.
Yep.
And they went to add on the pods that probably should have been in the beginning, and they kept, like Danny pointed out, and maybe should have reached a little further. Now all of a sudden that cost of construction had tripled, because now you've got to back into it and run into it. So, okay, I think a little bit of that went on, and the group come up with a 96-bed facility.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the reality of something like this, it's kind of like the field of dreams. You build it, and they're going to come here. You're going to fill this thing up, you know, as soon as this thing's built. Not necessarily with all county inmates, but you're going to see a quick rise in that. It will get used, that's for sure.
So what's a reasonable, I mean, I know that the building cost now is around 20 million for this. So honestly, we need to work at maybe, I think Gary, you guys had talked about some numbers, trying to get this project down to around 18 and that one across the street over 2.5 million,
Right.
trying to fit it all in.
Right. No, I think that's our goal.
So you think that's even feasible?
It depends on what we're able to do. I mean, to go from 20 down to 18, $2 million out of those things.
Danny will paint it.
I'll do anything I gotta. But
I
I'm just scared to, I do actually, you have to mention something. I'm scared to get the project right at our budget number.
Right.
Because I don't care what anybody tells me, there's gonna be change orders. My company runs on change orders. I mean,
Right.
when we're talking about a job, I'm going around talking about your family. I'm not talking about that job because they want you to forget all this.
Right.
So I can make money. I'm not,
So-
every contractor's like that. Not me, of course, but everybody
Sure.
else.
Yeah, not Danny.
So part of what River City does, and I can let them speak more in detail, is, but part of that is having contingencies in place. So part of that overall $20 million had a contingency allowance in there to cover.
$400,000, I believe, or nearly $400,000 in contingency.
Yeah,
So it's
to cover
a couple percent.
unforeseens, to
Well, that's usually
cover.
my bid on the project, but, but like, so there's little stuff like, what's Kevin gonna do? I mean, what are we looking at, two years for this thing? If we started today, it'd be 2 years before we ever moved over.
I think a year and a half was.
This was an 18-month
It was
project.
an 18-month.
So, I mean, I'm just scared of being it right at that budget number
Right.
with a project that we are all redesigning and trying to fit everything in.
No, it'd be nice to have as much buffer as we can, or take the alternate bids as we can. You know, on the flip side of that, so say we had $400,000 contingency set aside, and that money's not used, all that money goes right back to the county too. Right. It's nothing the River City keeps, so.
But where you
Well, I
see
don't
your
foresee that happening
contingency,
at all.
I don't see, you know, I don't see a big risk on the contingency. You would see the bigger risk on a renovation project or something where there's a lot of unknowns. This is a brand new building. And unless Linn County has any, you know, changes towards the project or betterments or things that want to, this is pretty straightforward.
I mean, but the basement was that was a huge unknown. That was just, one option was thrown at us that we don't get it and we gotta go on, we get this metal building, and then that was thrown out.
Right.
From when I started, what I was so irritated about was that happened, we didn't get the basement, then we were getting a metal storage building, and I asked and talked about it, and it was, yeah, we'll get it, to get me to shut the hell up so we could move on. And we were promised if there's money left over, we get a health department, so we told her we need a health department, or she might be getting a health department. now we're stuck trying to get her a health department one day soon, because that was kind of her hope. So I feel like we've put ourselves in a situation here.
But that basement option, I mean, that was one of the things we looked at day one. I mean, we went through the pricing option with GGA and gave those cost analysis along the way of what that savings would be by not going to the basement.
And in addition, you know, we took that square footage from the basement and tried to encapsulate that back into this. So the floor plan, the ground floor plan grew when we took that basement away to compensate for that lost basement space. And then, yes, the outbuilding was something that's always been on the radar. It was always scoped for that. Our change order record on a project has been minimal, so $400,000 I think was pretty sufficient for unknowns, for errors on our part or our engineers or whatever the case was. To where there should have been, I think we had $132,000 budgeted for that pre-engineered storage building. I won't say I guarantee, but there are pretty good odds that money would have been left over to complete that storage building into the project, just based on our track record.
But again, why spend it until you obviously know that money's there?
Keep that
It's
buffer
not-
there,
it's-
yeah.
It doesn't say any storage building or basement in it, we've gotta get this, make this work, what we committed to.
Right.
So what else do you need from us today?
Nothing hard, I just wanted to kind of sit down and talk to you guys, throw some options out on the table. I said, I'd really like to take a look at some of these other buildings, see if it can be utilized. Granted, they're more geared towards the government center piece of this. But yeah, do we need to take a look at some of these buildings and the courts and talk to the judges? And maybe that's a future meeting date to have, but, I said basically just want to get in front of you guys and sit down and talk about some of this and get some direction and get some feedback from you guys.
And the reality of it is, this has got to be shrunk. Okay.
That's the reality, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And we gotta look at the whole project. I mean, they brought us a project, said here, we can get this part into the budget, and that's, we've gotta get a government, we've gotta get that piece in there.
Right.
So, and the options are, there's gonna be some compromises, and let them bring them back to us.
Sure.
Anything we can do to support you, I mean,
No, we appreciate that, and I think Joe had a good point too on that government center piece, to look at separating that and having that as a local GC bid, get some of these smaller subs involved. Obviously, Kansas is a right to work state, so we don't have prevailing wage to deal with. You know, can local concrete guy that can handle a 10,000 square foot building, but he couldn't handle a 40,000 square foot building. Is that
and
something?
10,000 square foot building, yeah.
Right,
Right.
right.
The problem is you're gonna have that separated, and you may not know that information until that project gets bid out too.
Right.
Right, we've obviously went through the pricing exercise of that portion now, but you're gonna have to set up a separate package or a separate bid phase for that, and it's gonna have to be a competitively hard bid.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. I got
Which
you.
we'd be willing to help the county take care of, you know, as far as bidding that piece of it out. We'd advertise.
This is the main baby right here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
I saw in one of the divisions on the bid documents that there was only, they only called for 2 qualified bidders on it. Why was it, there was only allowed to bid on that part of the project? How come
You remember what it was, Andy?
it was the electrical or the camera parts of it? And Chris and I had sat down and talked about it and noticed that they're only allowed for 2 bidders. Is there anything, I mean,
Probably
other
2
divisions?
vendors, right?
Yeah, I'd have to take a look at that, 'cause I can't recall what specific was in there. Maybe Chris, you recall, I don't know, but yeah, I'd be happy to take a look at that. I mean, usually we don't like to limit that unless it's something critical and there's only certain companies qualified for it. You know, we don't want to give you, some of these security electronics contractors are kind of
Fly by night.
Yes, less than professional. We don't want to lock the county into something that's proprietary, or you have to have a service maintenance contract with. So one of the things like with active controls, for instance, it's all non-proprietary. They train you how to use it. Everything's turned over to the county, including all the source codes and so forth. There's some companies that don't do that, and then they get you locked into a maintenance contract after the fact, and you're paying them tens of thousands of dollars every year for them to maintain and take care of the system. And so in some scenarios, with critical pieces like that, we do limit the competition. We'd still like competition, don't get me wrong. I'd like to have at least 3 bidders, but in some cases, there's not 3 bidders to have on there. For instance, the detention hollow metal on here. You basically got 2 companies in the United States that make detention hollow metal that have gone through all the ASTM testing and been certified. You have American and Trust Built, owned by the same parent company, and then you've got Titan Steel. That's it. So to get 3 competitive bids, you're not going to, because the 2 companies are owned by the one. I mean, one of them's gonna bid or the other's not. And then you've got Titan's gonna bid this thing. So unfortunately, you have 2 bids on bid day for
Right.
detention hollow metal. So,
And in that scenario, one of those can't meet that timeline, now you reduced to one, and now they
Right.
wrote their price in. Chris, was that an actual vendor, or was it actually a?
No, it was a vendor,
Yeah.
and it was accurate, and they were both out of Wisconsin.
Okay.
But it required one of those two subs to be the provider.
Okay.
Actually, material supplier, right?
Right. So one of the things that Chris and I just briefly talked about before this meeting was sitting down and going through that entire scope of security electronics. Obviously, with the county willing to do the CCTV system, we got a lot of parts and pieces to work out. And I think it's gonna be just an additional meeting between Chris, myself, and then the security electronics contractor. Just to hammer out any details like that to make sure.
So you see any additional cost or reduction in that?
As far as security electronics stuff goes, no. With the exception of if the county's doing the CCTV system, yes, there would be a reduction in cost for that piece of it. So I think that was valued somewhere around $279,000 between the government center and the justice center. So if the county's able to do that, there'll be some cost savings there as well too.
I once bid a hospital project with 7 phases over 4 years, and one of the pieces that was subbing under me was a fire alarm contractor. Contractor came in, the interface board and all that, and got the first phase, very competitive, very cheap. Well, guess what? He's proprietary now.
You're locked.
He named his price and any of the rest of the phases that went on through that. In the second phase, we went in and tore that panel out and replaced it, because a non-proprietary company could come in there. I mean, if you can't get but one person to come to work on something, period, you pay whatever they want to do that. And so I
Yep.
no, thank you.
Another big piece of this too, between the Justice Center and Government Center, again, it's maybe smaller on the scale here, but I know part of when we did this project as a package between the two buildings, you're asking contractors to hold off 6 months out before we go start working on this Government Center, however many months we had this staggered. So you're projecting, contractors project bids that far out. If we can have those bid and work to be done now, I think we can get better numbers on that piece of it.
We talked about that initially, and it was like, if you're a slab-on-grade guy or an excavator, you've got 2 modes, I mean, there's no benefit to being on a different timeline. Gary, I think we have that resolved, do we not? I mean, we can move these facilities around.
I think we had a plan that we penciled out that would enable us to do them both simultaneously.
Well, that'd be great, that'd be great.
So on this part of the project, when do you need some hard, are you going to go back and make suggestions, or when do you want our feedback on what to cut, or?
It can go both directions on
Okay.
that, or both at the same time. I said, having some of this conversation today, I can go back and relook at some of these things and start putting some numbers to it. And on the same term, if you guys have ideas, or the sheriff, or Chris, anybody else does, we can have that conversation as often as we need to, have this
Sure.
come from both directions, so. I think the quicker the better. Bid market's, I think, starting to turn. When's the ideal time? I mean, these guys probably know a lot better than I do. But I like to have the plans ready, so when the time is right,
Do
we're
it.
not playing catch-up, trying to get this thing crammed out the door, again, to rebid.
So give me a timeline, you be back in a couple of weeks, and
I
with
can be
some
back in a
ideas
couple
of
weeks,
I mean, I don't care if you came back or we Zoom meeting or
Right.
whatever, but obviously, we probably don't wanna wait
I think the sooner,
December to get the start dirt work.
Sooner the better, because obviously you're gonna get into the winter months here pretty quick.
Obviously, so that's our goal, to get this thing going.
I think hit this as quick as, and as hard as we can to get this thing
If we're
rescoped.
trying to build a masonry with that winter, that's gonna add cost right there, so.
Well, I think it's gonna happen anyway. I mean, really, if we started now, it's gonna happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of block to be laid on this thing. And again, predicting what the construction market's gonna do, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. It may be as good as it's gonna get right now, or 6 months from now, maybe even gotten better, because whatever's still going on, I don't know.
People pouring money to stimulate the economy, so I mean, but I think there's gonna be a lead lag, and hopefully we'll end up in that.
I was talking to a CM, construction management company we're working with up in Michigan, and they just recently bid a assisted living care facility. So they've got these contractors, subcontractors that are receiving all these federal funds from this whole COVID pandemic. We're bidding projects on the cheap, because they've already got their staff covered, their overhead and profit covered from this government subsidy check, so they're taking projects for next to nothing. It's just pure profit for them. So they're seeing some extremely good numbers coming on stuff right now. But how long is that going to last?
I'm ready to try and capitalize on it if we can.
So I would suggest that you set a meeting date now
Yeah.
to get back.
Sure.
Because it took me about half a week to get this one scheduled.
Right, right.
6/18?
2 weeks from today's the 1st of July.
Let me look at the
I
calendar
will
for this
not be
room
around on
too.
the 4th, or 1st of July.
You what?
I won't be around then.
Okay, I'm just throwing
Can
out
you do
there
it
for
before,
today.
or how much time do you need to get back to us? Is 2 weeks not enough? Is it too much?
I think 2 weeks is a good amount to kind of put some
Are you
numbers
gonna be
and
here?
pencils to this.
You out all that week, Danny?
Yeah, I'll be out
How about the 8th of July?
I'll be back by then, yeah.
Okay, the only thing I
When do
see
you
on
leave?
the calendar here is Frontier Farm Credit, and they
Me too, I'll be
typically
out
can
too.
move into that other room if they need to.
I'm good either one of those dates.
Okay.
July 8th?
Works for me.
And do you need us to get back with you if we have any
If you got
ideas?
anything in the meantime, shoot it my way. I mean,
Yeah, I
Me
think
too, Gary.
we want to get all your ideas to them, hopefully within the next week, so they've got some time to work on them. I also want to meet, want you to meet with the judge between now and then, or, you know, and she probably will Zoom
Sure.
meet with you.
yeah, absolutely.
But-
And I'd like to have Larry be part of that conversation, so I need to coordinate with his schedule
Okay,
just to make sure he's a part of that
And look at
conversation.
probably a 10 o'clock meeting that day too, or
10 o'clock work okay here
Yeah,
today?
absolutely, absolutely.
there is that, Mike, the ballot proof. There's 4 copies there, but in that is the language that's on the ballot on like the 3rd page, I think. Or maybe 2nd page, I'm not sure which way she arranged it.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Now, are you guys wanting to look at some other stuff now?
I wouldn't mind if somebody's
Okay.
got some time to.
Yeah, I can take it. You guys
Gonna adjourn?
ready to wrap up? What are you gonna do?
Okay.
I'm gonna go hang out with you guys.
Sure.
Let's adjourn. Make a motion, we adjourn.
But you wanna, I mean,
Are more than one commissioner gonna
I'm
come?
not, no.
Now, I've got kind of emergency work.
Okay, so, that's fine.
I do wanna give, I wanna open this up for about 3 minutes of public comment, just because, you know, you guys came out here to listen. You guys wanna let somebody say something before we adjourn? Larry, go ahead.
I've got one question. We're talking about trying to save millions. Can we pay off this bond right now and go for refinance?
I think in theory we can, whether it's, right now bonds are a little higher, I think. I think bonds are not, you know, as opposed to borrowing, you know.
I think Joey looked into that, didn't he?
Yeah, I think Joy checked on it. We have to check with him, but in theory, yes, we can. Is it practical? I'm not sure.
Well, that's, some of the guys at the bank were saying that they could save millions over the life of this contract if we refinance because the rates are so much lower.
Well, financing rates are lower, but the bonds are,
I just asked the
Yeah.
question, can we
yes, I
break
think,
this and go for another if we choose?
if we choose to do so, I think that's legally possible. Whether it's practical, I don't know. I'm not,
I agree with that.
yeah.
Is that something that we should look into, talk to Joey and?
We have talked to him some, and he's doing some additional work on it right now, I think.
I've got a question too. We've got the sheriff sitting there, and I just wonder, is he comfortable with the 96-bed jail, or is it, what's his idea on the jail?
Well, I can't speak for him, but we've talked a little bit. We've all stayed in touch.
I'll be happy. You know, what, I think what I'm comfortable with, as far as the 96-bed facility goes, if that's what was presented to the people, it's hard to draw back from that. And I think if we go look at what we presented to the people, I think it has to go back to the people to be looked at again. And as far as operating the facility, we're in a non-contact facility. It's probably, you know, I don't assume it's gonna be any, worse than if we were in a smaller facility. We'll have to have a little bit more staffing and some things like that. But under this plan, it's how it was presented that's important to me, because I don't feel like it's not my job nor their job as the commission to change what was presented and what was accepted. And if we break away from this plan, and do something different, you know, that's up to the people, it's not up to me. I'm not putting the bricks together to build the thing.
I don't recall it being presented to us as far as the 96 bed jail. I recall it being the way we was gonna pay for it, whether it be sales tax or personal property.
That's what was voted on. was
That's all the-
The
the
price,
public got
the price and the sales tax was what was voted on. In the meetings, there was discussion. In fact, I think it was the advisory group that urged the commissioners to go to the 96 bed size.
And it actually got really crazy there. I don't know if you have attended, I know Larry attended, somebody was suggesting 200-man sales and all kinds of other
I'm saying the
nonsense.
public didn't get to vote on, that's what I'm saying, as far as. how
They voted on the
jail
amount
was.
and the sales tax, yeah.
Pardon me?
They voted on the sales tax, 1%, and the amount, basically.
Yeah, but it wasn't voted, we didn't get to vote on what we were getting.
Right. Yeah, it's,
Mr. Johnson, I think, I don't know if I can better answer your question or not, but I think that there's been some concessions made in some dorm-style rooms and things like that in the pods. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really like dorm-style facilities. I don't think that they're as safe for the inmate population. And a lot of people would say, you know, they would be non-caring about that. But I have to be because it's liability. And it's liability on our county and our people. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, honestly, if we were to cut the size of the bed space down, as far as I would be concerned, we could get rid of those dormitory style things and we would save some space there. It's gonna make our footprint smaller. And the problem with that is I think there's some portions of our community that have an expectation for some type of a revenue out of this, if you will, that we would bring other people into housing. And, you know, I don't even know, and I might be speaking out of turn, but I don't even know that, like, Department of Corrections would allow housing in those types of facilities. So under this project, if we wanted to save X amount of dollars and had to cut more, and, you know, I think, personally, I believe the court needs to be cut some. We got a courtroom that operates 1, 2 court, days a week. I don't know why we need 2 of those. If we're gonna cut out of the jail, we cut out that dorm stuff and we build that smaller footprint. And, that's my thought. But, you know, I'm more concerned as to what the people's perception of this is gonna look like when it's done. You know, what
Has
it's
anybody talked about what the operating cost of this deal will be once we get to the 96 bed? How many more dollars will be in your budget to operate this?
Yeah, that's been discussed, and I've talked with Joe Weber, and, you know, we've already talked about personnel and training and things like that, and, you know, there's gonna be a pretty good uptick.
How much?
In that.
There's a study available to the public. It was all part of the jail study, part of the maintenance, the
So
ongoing.
it will be above the budget it is right now, is what you're telling me.
Can I finish? Okay. There was a study for the jail that was presented to us by Goldberg, and it wasn't even as much as the furniture and the equipment that was required to put into the jail, so there wouldn't be any surprise or costs on the back end of it.
Right.
You've done, what, 300 of such justice projects?
Yeah.
Like that. So in that study, it does address the maintenance and the ongoing costs as well as personnel.
Yeah, staffing.
Employee benefits and, you know.
What's the dollar figure?
Well, it's in that study, you'd have to.
I don't recall what it is off the top of my head, but yeah, it's all in that study.
So that'll be above what our operating cost is right now, I mean, as far as our budget.
I'd have to go back and look, I don't recall if it's in.
Well, that's something that's pretty important. to
Sure,
me. I
sure.
mean, you know,
That's the reason it was studied, is because we knew there was something.
And I didn't bring it with me, I apologize, but I know the county has it, and we'd be able to provide that to you guys.
David, would you have a copy of that study by chance?
I'm looking to see what I've got. I don't see it in this folder where I saved a bunch of jail project stuff. So I know we have it somewhere, but I don't think I've got it right here where I can get to it.
We can't make the numbers come close. It's $1 million loss no matter what, including 50% or 50 people from outsourcing in. I'd like somebody to show me the numbers.
And that was part of that study as well too, as far as what the cost is. Obviously, you're going from, what do you have, 12 bed facility now?
18 full.
18.
Yeah.
Going
We
from
were built for 11.
Right.
done some renovation and made it 18 that we could get fit in.
Right.
There's 18 beds.
Right.
What has been your prisoner population since you've taken over average?
October, November, December, January, half of March, we were running 38, about 38 per day. So I know we were farming out all of those months, and then COVID hit, so that changed things a little bit. But all of those months, I know we were farming out 15 per day in Anderson and 3, 4, 5 per day to Bourbon. And we've kind of lost that space at Bourbon now because they're full up on their own. So when things get back to normal, of course, March, half of March, April, and May, they weren't normal because of COVID. So we had our judiciaries were moving out a lot of the misdemeanor stuff because of speedy trial issues and things like that. They were leaving us. So right now, I think today we're probably 18, 20, and we're all in house except I have one in Bourbon, and I think they're, I mean, it's a special hold on them. They like to live on the nurse's floor down there. We have one there, and we may have one in Anderson. So.
I'm gonna take one more question. Pat, did you have a question? Short question with a short answer?
Yeah, Sheriff Felix had commented at the original meeting that he wasn't even anticipating having to hire any staff, any additional staff to run the jail. Not gonna happen.
I believe the determination that I heard was that there would take like 3 additional staff or full-time staff or.
I think under the guideline, I think the study on that tells us that we'll need 4.5 persons per shift. Right now, we run 2 per shift. And before I came, there was, they were bringing in, you know, a few extra jail staff positions, but it made sense because they were bringing in, and, you know, we'd have a male, female on each shift to take care of those populations. So, they were trying to alleviate some liability with that, but realistically, you have to probably look at, you know, 2.5 persons more per shift to make that all work out to get to the standard of where we should be.
So basically, 24 hours, 7-day a week, that's gonna take 10 more employees, plus vacation.
8, yeah, you're probably pretty close.
Well, it takes 4 shifts to fill a weekly, 24 hour a day, 4 40-hour shift.
Right. And then you'd be looking at vacation, you know, those
So
types
that's
of
10 employees.
Right, those types of things per employee.
And
Well,
you
yeah.
have to have transport people also.
Do what now?
You have to have them transport staff also.
I mean, yeah, I think we got to catch up to the world, though. We can't. We keep setting behind. We're gonna be even more trouble. So it's what we're doing. We're getting it worked out. A lot of this question you guys are asking are public knowledge. Maybe get with David or everybody. You can get my phone number. I have raised my hand and came in here, you know, halfway through the project. So I probably don't have as good answers as a lot of other people, but
There are shortages on construction materials.
yeah.
Yeah, somebody does that, yeah.
Commissioner, Mike asked a question about outsourcing. Currently, for our prisoner population going into Anderson County, we're at $45 a day. I can tell you, we ran into a situation just pre-COVID where Anderson was full, Bourbon was full, we were full, and I called up to the Franklin County area where we housed up there before, and they had raised their rate because it was a premium, and they were housing in Johnson County folks, and they were up in the $70 per day bed space. So if we can keep it south, we're about $45. That would be a decent figure to plan on for that outsourcing.
All right.
And historically, I guess to answer your question too, Mike, the most in the past 5 years that we have paid for outsourcing, and I'm thinking it was $334,000, and that was a few years ago for out-of-housing costs. But as an average in general, we're probably looking at $300,000 to $320,000 per year. This year's going to be a little bit different though because of COVID. We'll save some dollars there.
Well, I invite everybody to come hang out with us on Commissioner Day on Mondays, or watch us on YouTube, Linn County Commissioner. Is that what it is, Kevin, or Chris? What is it? Linn County live stream, that's it. So, thank you guys for coming out. We'll close public comment, and I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Moving second, all in favor?
Aye.
On the staffing.
Hey, thanks for coming, buddy. Appreciate it. I hope we can get this thing. Yeah.
I know I haven't. Let's go look at it. To me, so I've got it. Okay, so it may be. I told her we want to. I don't think you guys have maybe a day or two. Hey, Danny, before you get away. I'm gonna hang out with these guys. Yeah. I'll take work. Just looking at names. I think I could probably talk about that and see what day it is. Well, it's August 4th, Tuesday, and then there'd be a class the week before for some training. Anybody times all right. I mean, let's tell you, for me, you need to prepare, because I mean, is there, well, I could probably get a few other people when she's out there. She's apparently registered. Yeah, and we're needing a demo at one of the spots over there. But we wanted to check with you, because we thought that probably wasn't as working there, and we didn't know her, so I didn't know if that was a good place to ask her. Everyone said you were there. What was it, August 4th would be election day, and then there'd be a training one of the days of the week before, and I'll have the schedule. Probably like Wednesday or Thursday the week before, there'd be a training class.
Yeah.
Take a look at that house first.
I guess
Kevin, don't all three walk.
Yeah, I just told Bob.